There you go.
Hi, Danny.
Hi,
Yeah.
Danny.
Oh wow, this is recorded.
Yes, we're
Deal.
we're gonna have a just for folks who haven't been able to kind of attend. Also gonna post it on Facebook so folks can join in at a different time. But welcome, David. I see you're here, and Charles as well.
Hello.
Hey, hello,
Hello.
Gail.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How is
Good.
everyone?
You?
Glad to see everyone.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, I'm all good.
Good to see you, David. We haven't I know talked in a few months now, so it's good to see you. We see I think we've seen Danny and Charles in the last few convenings, so it's great to have you all here. We're gonna give it a minute or so, and then I think we'll get started. But as we're waiting up, in our kind of usual tradition, I've created a bit of a poll that I'll share. So we'll wait exactly kind of minute, and then we'll start with the poll. And in the meantime, I'll just get us going live on Facebook.
Yes, we have had several people confirm that they were coming, but it's an internet world, right? We're dependent upon the internet, and it depends where you are and if your country decides to have electricity that day, right?
Yeah, you can
Some
imagine
places.
I had to come to town all the way from my rural home to get where I can get power and also internet. I have to buy, I don't have like I have to buy like a bundle to use for this one. So it is so difficult from my end here, but I'm glad I was able to make it to the meeting.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. That's amazing. Okay, so I think we'll let's get started with the conversation, and I think we'll let folks in as they join us. Okay, so what I'd love for us to do actually to get started before I introduce our wonderful speaker here today is do a quick poll. And so we have a really fun poll, and Cecilia, you probably can participate, although you know the right answer. So I'll introduce our next speaker in just a second. Before I do that, one of the things you're seeing on your screen is not true, is a false. And it'll give us about a minute to ask Cecilia questions about any of these facts, and then we're gonna have to kind of vote on the, oh what, someone's already voted on the poll. But if not, you can ask a couple of questions and then we can vote on the poll. So I'll just let you all turn on your mic and ask any questions before we get started. I do have a question on like, what does an addiction to black licorice mean? Like how much are you consuming in a day?
Oh boy, that's a great question because it begs all of us to think about what the word addiction means, right? That when we do anything that is in excess and it causes us to, not do other things, then I'd say it's an addiction. I think sometimes it's just thinking about it, right? Like, boy, I wish I could eat sweets all day. And sometimes it's doing it, right? I think that's the case for anything that we do in excess. So black licorice is actually, it just hit the news in the US not too long ago that if you eat too much of it, the scientists and doctors are now worried that it has, did you read that, Gail? That it has, yeah. So not a good thing to eat in black licorice in excess.
It's so hard to have the questions and not give away what is going on. That's like kind of tricky.
Right. Yeah, you could probably guess easily on that one now.
Okay, well, I'll see if anyone else has any questions on any of these facts. And then if not, we can go ahead and do a quick poll and see if we can guess the right answer. So one of these is not true about Cecilia. So I think Asta, you just joined us. If you want to ask her any question about any of the facts that you see on this poll, feel free to ask. And then we'll get started.
I have a question on the second one. I'm not good at English. The unisila, what does it mean?
Mm.
Oh yeah. So a bicycle has two wheels and a unicycle has one. So it's a version of a bicycle that you have to balance on one seat on top of one wheel, and there are two pedals.
Yeah, I think I've seen it before. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
yeah. Unicycle for one wheel is what that means. Uni
Mm,
one. Mhm.
got you.
Okay, we're getting in votes. Folks have changed their votes based on that answer I'm seeing, so that's good. Okay, well, I'll give us a few more seconds because I know we have a wonderful conversation ahead of us. If anyone hasn't voted yet, please do feel free to vote, and then we'll show the response. Okay, so everyone's gotten their votes in. Wow, it seems like everyone's, well, 90% is 80% is going for the unicycle. Cecilia, did we guess it right as a community? Are we completely off here?
You did. You got it right. I'm not an expert unicycler. My daughter actually is. So that's how I came up with that, even that idea. She started unicycling when she was like 7 and got to be really, really good. So I did actually help raise black widow spiders. I thought you all might say that was a lie, but
That's
I did
wonderful.
have an experience with that when I lived on a farm in the Midwest.
Fantastic. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for
Wow.
sharing some
Did
of
you
these.
know that, Gail? You knew
I
that.
didn't know that about you, and I thought I knew a lot of things about you, but I didn't know that.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
not something I would ever do again, because
Mhm.
it's a bit nerve-wracking to have creatures in your home that aren't safe.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow. Fascinating.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those facts and welcome
Yeah.
everyone. If you're joining in as we're kind of getting started, we're just getting a bit of an introduction to Cecilia, who's joining us today. Before we start the conversation, I thought I'd also do a bit of a formal introduction. So I just want to share a little bit about Cecilia. As a creative thinker, educator, writer, and community bridge builder, Cici, as she likes to be called, brings energy and passion to projects centered on innovation in education, access to equitable and sustainable housing, and community engagement. She has a decade of experience in corporate training and education, 2 decades of experience in public education and leadership, and has been recently working on an inspired team building inclusive housing in urban communities. She has a degree. She has degrees in English, business administration, and education leadership, as well as the scrappy real world learning achieved as a newspaper delivery girl, a waitress, an editor, a middle school educator, and a mom. When not working, which it seems like, which is not a lot of time, I'm sure, reading or cooking, she spends her time feeling off her poetry and mountain trails. Cecilia, we're so honored to have you here, and we're really excited for this conversation. I'll kind of pass it on to Gail for a wonderful and engaging conversation. We'll have about kind of 30 minutes of kind of back and forth fireside chat. And then we'll actually open up for folks to ask questions. So if you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat, or at the end we'll open up and you can just ask questions to CC yourself as well. Thank you once again for joining us, and we're really looking
Thanks for
forward to this
having
learning
me.
opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, Cece, it's always so great to talk with you, and thank you for being here. I know that you know something about Little Big Fund, and you know the people that are here with us today are from all around, right? And they're all working to make the world a better place. It's a global representation that we have here. Just quickly, Danny, you're working here in the US, right? And David, you're in Tanzania, is that correct?
I'm in Kenya,
You're in Kenya,
Kisumu,
I'm
Kenya.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Charles, you're on the East Coast, but your project is based in Uganda, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And Asta, where are you? Oh, do you know? Well,
I think she's coming in from Nepal. Yeah.
from Nepal. Okay. And you can hear maybe a little bit more from them later about their initiatives, Cece, but just to give you a sense of maybe the time zones, but certainly the global attention that you're getting today.
Humbled.
I wanted to, this conversation that you and I are going to have is in part going to be about values, right? And what kind of, value systems it takes for us to bring about change and innovation. You and I talk about value systems all the time, right? And how important that is. That informs us in our work and our personhood and who we are, how we walk on our trails, and how we pick our poetry to read, right? And I wanted to take the group back to a time when you and I were working in rural Colorado with students, and we came across a quote, and I know that you're going to know right away what quote I'm talking about because it resonates with us deeply even now, but I'm going to read it, and it's by Leela Watson, and it's a quote that says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And that's encapsulates something about this conversation around a value system for innovation and a value system for making change. So start us off and tell us about why that quote is so meaningful to you and why you think it's something to always carry it with us in our sort of virtual backpacks of changing the world.
Oh, I love that, virtual backpacks. Yeah, I have that. Usually it's in my office that you can't see it here. But I have that quote. It's been on my wall since we first, gosh, what has it been? 20 years. The value that I think it speaks to that is a continuous, we strive for continuously, is how do we deeply know and understand one another? How do we get to know and get an authentic relationship with the people around us, whether they are our clients, maybe we're creating a product, a service to serve someone, or our family members. This value of always striving for authentic connection through really what our basic and simple skills like deep listening, um, working hard to understand another person's perspective, putting yourself in another person's shoes. We hear that often, but for me, that really means trying to think and feel and be what another person is experiencing in that other person's life. Um, so as an example for that, like when Gail, when you and I worked with middle school kids, we would do things like, we were in a small community and these were kids who, came from Boulder and didn't have maybe the experience of a rural community. So we would take action to connect with what that community experience was like by dropping them off at random places across the city and ask them to navigate, to find their way around this new community. How do you do that? How do you navigate? Who do you talk to learn more about the community and to find directions for where you are going? That's an example of an action that we all took together that I think was really impactful, because I believe in action. So our values are easy to think about and say, oh, let's listen to each other. Let's deeply connect, right? But those are all thoughts in our heads, right? So to make them real, we have to take action. And that's doing things like out of your comfort zone, experiencing listening at different levels and reflecting on it. And I loved being a teacher probably most in all of the jobs of my career, because that's what I got to do, was to create experiences that are action based, not just thinking, so that kids could learn how these values are alive in their lives. Did that answer, Gail?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So tell us a story of when you thought you were helping someone, right? And you were taking the action that was mirroring your values. And then you maybe thought, oops, like tell us a story of how that impacted you personally, that process of
Yes,
being present and matching your action with your values.
with your values. Yeah. You know, to answer that, that's a great question, because I think a step back from that is I've had the experience of being able to kind of inventory my values. So through my education, I've done tools and surveys and lists and conversations, and I'm old enough now. I have enough years that I could tell you my top 5, 6 values that I live by. And this value of connecting and being authentically, is what I just shared, like being able to be with someone, with a community, and try my hardest to understand who they are, how they live. That's a really high value. And also high in my value system is this work ethic. So, and I bring this up to your question, Gail, because they sometimes clash, right? Our values sometimes fight for what's most important at the moment. And so if, like Danny, for instance, if you're like a really hard worker and you get up every day and you're like, I'm going to get these tasks done. And this is me, but I'm wondering, there's probably several of you out here who relate to this, where you are driven. Sometimes we call it ambitious, right? Or a go-getter, right? I've also been called a workaholic, which is the worst. Okay. So back to your question, Gail, when you want to slow down and understand, I want to understand David and your life, but I also have this go-getter ambition. I will stumble. I'll sometimes jump in to help when I haven't taken the time to know and feel and be what it is that I actually need to do. And oh gosh, a story about this. I'm going to try to think of a present one, because I've talked a little bit about school. Right now, I help teams create affordable housing for our communities across Denver. And my job is to win jobs. So my job is to help present us as a way that we can create the best and most, I don't want to say the cheapest, but the most affordable housing at the highest quality. And recently I was putting together a package for a job, and I did my quick rush to get it done, right? That ambition, that drive jumped in, and I went for it. And then I had to stop because I realized our company, and my proposal was really saying, we'll come in and fix this for you. We'll make this housing work. We'll meet your goals. And when I stopped and I looked at the community and I talked to my team, this particular project is for people who have experienced homelessness, and they need permanent housing that is affordable and high quality. And I did this reflective practice, and I did call up that value of trying to deeply know and understand what this community needed. And then I slowed down and I started to make some calls and found a couple organizations to partner with. That's the other thing, is that we can't always do our projects alone. We have to reach out and find partners. So I ended up being able to put into our plan an opportunity for two local organizations to not only live in that housing, but also help have a job to create it. And I wouldn't have done that. Like I wouldn't have been able to make the project, make the housing connect with the community if I hadn't done that slowing process and asked questions. You know, what if the people in the community who are still experiencing homelessness and joblessness, what if our project could create jobs for them? That was a question I asked. And then I said, yes, what if we could do that? How would we do it? Who are the partners that need to join us? And what is the training that's needed? We're in the building industry, so we also need job training and skill building and experiences. So I just found out last week that we won that project.
Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Yay.
And I think the reason that we won it honestly is this piece, because we're good builders. We can create beautiful buildings, but this piece of engaging the community in the project in a supportive way, I think was what allowed us to win the project.
That's wonderful. That's so
Long
great.
answer.
No, that's good. That's really exciting. And
Yeah.
that leads me to a question of, so when you recognize, that there's some calibration that has to happen, some merging, some, blending and collaboration. And I think that that's something that we all have to think about, right? In 2020 and beyond. What are some of the compromises that you had to convince your boss? And I mean, what kinds of things did you have to say, oops, guess we're not going to be able to do that in order to collaborate? Tell us something about what that takes.
Yeah, so compromises and collaboration. So that's another top value, is I believe that we ourselves are our best selves when we are in a creative experience with others. That was an example of me being limited until I enriched the conversation like you all are doing through the Little Big Fund and talking with each other and sharing ideas and problem solving together. I would say that's in my top 5 values as well, is this idea that I'm the kind of person that requires that. I can't be a sole thinker. I need cross-pollination. And I seek it. That's another actionable item to do each day, is to get out of your box thinking. What we need to all do is bring in these ideas from others. I use the internet a lot now. Like I say, I spy on other industries. Like yesterday, I was looking at the spice industry. This is cooking, which has nothing to do with my industry, but I'm looking at their creative energy and their approach to problems and the way they communicate in the world, and I'm gleaning those ideas. So I'm even doing this collaborative kind of spirit when we're in our own, rooms because of the pandemic. But your question was really on what's the compromise that has to happen. Back to my story about the homeless housing. There's a huge team. There's to create something like this. There are people on the team who do all the finances, right? So they do the budget. There's a team that does all the safety and the materials and the supplies and all those people. And then there's us, the team that is about winning the project and communicating the message of what the project is. There's the leaders. And then there's these groups of people that we want to participate in building the homeless housing and getting job trained, right? So I'm trying to give you a picture that collaborating across all these different perspectives is challenging. One of the things I had to do is convince members of the team that it's a worthwhile effort to use organizations that might need some additional training. So the project might take a little more time because the people coming to work on it maybe don't have the expertise immediately. So they need training. And so that was a compromise. But I think what we end up doing through compromise is we keep our sights up on what's the highest goal that we're going for. Is our highest goal, let's get this done fast because this is an important project, or is a higher goal, let's engage the community in this project? And having those conversations, asking those questions, help the compromise happen, right? I find when you're in conflict, what feels like conflict, because here's a goal here and here's one here, and it feels like it's conflicting, that we can get through that by reaching up to the highest value that we can, that is kind of the umbrella over that. And I don't know all your businesses, your products and services, or I pull those in, but the idea here is, I think there's always a higher question to ask when there's conflict like that, so that the compromise can have something to hook onto. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we had people that said, no, we need to be efficient. And then we had people that said, we need to engage the community. And the higher question about what was more important drove our decision to have the project go a little longer, but be more impactful for the people.
Right, right. And so how do you know when you're starting a collaboration, how do you gauge that the value systems are going to be in alignment? Or right, do you do like a pre-test or something with people?
Right. You know, that's a great question, Gail, because I can remember back in my life as a teacher, and as I was a teacher first, and then I helped lead schools for about a decade. And I think that's, as a school leader, I think that's where I had the most challenge around this. I would be in a room of teachers, and we would be trying to solve a problem. And, you know, the science teachers their value based on this problem was totally different. I think it's hard for people to name it, but I think asking questions, like when you're in conversation with a group, pausing for a minute and saying, and I used to do this in my teacher staff meetings, asking question like, why is that important? What's underneath? People kind of get that, kind of what's below or underneath what you're saying. And sometimes I would say, what's the most important thing for you? And I would put their word up on a board and we'd list them all. And sometimes it would be, there would be sort of a collective energy. People would say, oh yeah, I agree with Gail. My most important thing around this problem is that our kids are safe, right? I think I talked with you a lot about this, Gail, but this exercise around collaborative problem solving really takes a commitment. When you're trying to solve something, it takes everybody being committed to, who are we trying to solve this for? We used to call it, for writers, it's called who's your audience? So for example, with teachers, I used to always have to say, let's put the students in the center of the room. We're trying to solve this problem for our students, not for us. And that was a challenge, because sometimes we want to do what feels best for us. And when you're in a business or a service that is multifaceted, that has lots of different clients or people that you're serving, different ages, different needs. You have to get really clear in the collaborative session who's in the center here. Who are we working to solve this problem for? Sometimes it is just us. This team is, we're not functioning well. Let's solve this problem just for us. Often in my work, it's a person we're serving or a group we're serving, like students or formerly homeless people or folks that need affordable housing, right? Does that answer, Gail? So it's complicated. I think it takes really good facilitation, communication skills. It takes somebody who's brave in the team to do a deep breath, pause, and say, whoa, let's get to the core here. What we're talking about, what we're solving, what's most important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that answers it well. And it's a big question, and it's something to keep coming back to. And it might not be a question that's answered in one session. And
No,
it
and
might
it changes.
it might be important to hear from people who are not exactly, like us, right? And like, well, what do they see? Like when you were saying, the science teacher is going to have a different agenda than the language arts teacher, right?
Yeah.
Or the farmer might have a very different answer than the grain broker or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And to
Yeah.
get out of our being entrenched, because we often, I think, as humans, just think that our idea is the best. Not everyone, but many of us do. That it takes that first value, that deep listening, that having a sense inside yourself that I really truly want to understand what the science teacher is thinking, what my customer is thinking. I'm not just saying, oh, tell me your idea so I can tell you mine, it's better. It's really that it takes that deep, deep listening and that setting an intention to hear another's ideas and perspective. And
Yeah.
if you disagree, keep talking about it and then say, what is at the core? What's most important? What's at this highest level for me and what's there for you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And do you think that, do you feel, how do you feel in your heart about how our world is going to be able to practice that?
Yeah, my heart's always hopeful. I'm optimistic. We've gone through quite a bit of change here in the US, and I'm happy. I'm happy right now because I think words matter. The way we communicate with one another matters, and time. My optimism is strong. My wish is that we all had or took, it might be that we just need to take more time to do this kind of work with each other. I read a research report recently that was really fascinating, and it was documenting here in the US, we're having so many issues around race and the way that we're treating each other. And this research study basically said that if you take people of all races and all experiences and all backgrounds, and you put them together for 2 days using the tools that we already have for collaborative understanding and communication. We already have these tools as humans in our toolbox. We've already evolved really far to be able to share our stories with each other, understand one another, laugh together. So this study did this, and it took people in America, in the US, that were seemingly opposites, like they believed in totally different things. They were together for 2 days and went through these experiences together using these tools. And at the end of 2 days, the data was dramatic. They actually came out I mean, I'll be bold here and say they came out loving each other. And so I believe in that. I believe that can happen. I've experienced it myself. And the problem is we don't have the time. We don't take the time to be together in that way. Usually when we're together, we're rushing, right? We're trying to get stuff done. We're going off the value of, speed, efficiency. Some of us are in desperation. We don't have time. We have survival. But, I wish the entire world could do that. Wouldn't that be something? If we all stopped and we took 2 days and we were in groups of 50 or 30 and we went through this tool-based practice of connecting and listening and sharing and disagreeing and coming back together on what's most important.
Yes, yes.
So I'm hopeful. Now, if you had asked me a year ago, I may not be, but the pandemic has actually caused me to be more hopeful, more grateful.
I'm going to ask that. So there was something in the chat from Danny, and he was being reminded of a quote and of his, he wanted to share. Would you share what you just wrote and talk with Cece about that, Danny?
Sure. I just heard Cece, like when Cece was just talking about when two people have different ideas and they don't really like listen to each other, and that also applies to just generally two different perspectives and a disagreement in general. And it just reminded me of something that I was reading only the other day but it was basically having a willingness to practice the art of thoughtful disagreement, in which the philosophy of approaching a disagreement is that you only you sort of win if you accomplish the goal of being motivated by missing important information that the other person has. So instead of like just kind of like waiting to hear what they say to present your idea, you're kind of like curiously listening and saying, how can what you think enrich my perspective? And I want to learn that first. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Curiosity is such an awesome word because that's the underlying feeling or intention when you are in that collaborative sharing space together. Even if you're disagreeing, if you both stay really curious. And I have a tip because I'm spending a lot of time in front of my computer right now and talking on, but I keep on my desk, and I recommend this. I wish I could get it for you all, but I keep on my desk a manual for creative thinking, and there's all kinds of these. This is called A Whack on the Side of the Head. It's an old volume, but it was a bestseller for quite a while. And in it, I look at it for 5 minutes a day, just take a breather. And so I recommend this because this whole idea of staying curious, Danny, so that you can be in disagreement, and disagreements cause an implosion or kind of a bursting forth of new ideas. And you'll look at your solutions or your product in a different way when you engage in that kind of thinking. And I'm not naturally creative, so I use tools. And this one recommends that you do that often, that you seek out. It's called Be an Explorer, that you actually seek out experiences or conversations that are gonna automatically put you, you might think in disagreement, but the other way to think about it is in kind of artist mode, not in judging mode, but in artist mode. We start in young as artists, and we are doing this naturally as little kids. And then as we get older, we start to be more judging. And that shuts the creative thinking down. Yeah. And
Reminds
so,
me of the Walt Whitman quote, be curious, not judgmental.
yes. Are you an English major by chance?
I was told by my high school teachers that I should have been, but I ended up going into engineering for the wrong reasons.
Oh, well, you sound like an English major coming from one myself.
Mm, I love that. It's fun to have this conversation, and I think we're at a point where we could open it up, right? So, maybe Danny, if you wanted to say a little bit about what your project is, and then we could go around and hear from David and Charles and the others if you want. I mean, we have maybe about 15 minutes left, but I bet that Cece is curious
I am, yes.
about just, briefly to hear something about what you're doing, some context, and then see what comes from that.
Sure. So we're doing like a roundtable kind of thing, or
Yeah,
Cool.
that sounds good.
yeah. No, I love keeping I just love participating in this community and getting inspired every time. So thank you, Cece, for this. And it's funny because I'm in I have a for-profit venture that we're working on bringing a coffee into the world that also is infused with nutrient-dense benefits, and it's an environmentally sustainably grown type of coffee. So it's shade grown. So like Avi, I've been in the coffee world. I'm very new to it though, so that's my main thing, and that's called Peak State Coffee.
Mm,
But we're hoping to sort of leverage commerce as a tool for positive environmental impact.
love it.
Yeah, that's my
And
thing.
how's it going?
So far, so good. But we launched during the pandemic, so it's just been like a really price-sensitive consumer base to work with. But we've been growing every month. We just definitely undercapitalized, so just being patient.
Right. Wow. I'd love to try it. Is it on the market?
Yeah, it's just
You have a website or a
yeah, peakstatecoffee.com.
Can you put a link up? There it is. Great. Cool.
awesome Peak State
Okay.
Coffee? Okay, great.
So, yeah, who else would like to share or ask a question or introduce him or herself?
Yeah, I can be next. Oh, I'm David Odhiambo Ochieng. I recently was in Boulder for Watson Institute short course on social entrepreneurship, where I was working on my project on water hyacinth in Lake Victoria. And basically what we are doing is that we are having a problem of hyacinth, which is growing over the lake and cutting off the livelihood of the people like fishermen, and and also bringing diseases such as malaria because of the breeding cover that is on the lake. And what we are doing is that we are trying to find the economic value of the problem, like harvesting it and it to make and be used by people. So like recently we thought of making charcoal briquettes from them, and also making handbags, using, if we harvest them, we can use the stalks to make strings that we can use to make even mats. We can make simple sandals, and that's what I'm working on currently, and I'm hoping I will save the lake.
Wow. Fabulous project. Are
Thank
you,
you.
what's the process for getting it off? I guess it's probably is it on top of the water? Or does it go all the way down? Like, how do you
Yeah,
extract it?
yeah, basically it is not, it's like floating on top of the water. That's why it's so difficult to deal with it, because you can wake up and see it there, and the next minute you're not seeing it there because it is being driven by wind, and sometimes you have to wait until it comes to the shores. And the challenging part is harvesting it, because you have to use like boats and even special machines, but we are using the simplest and the cheapest way of like harvesting them, where we are using two boats and a strong net and trying to pull them out using a tractor.
Wow.
And and after harvesting it, we can leave it to dry because it is cheaper drying by the sun. And now after drying, you can use the stalks to make strings, or you can burn the stalks in less oxygen supply to form charcoal briquettes, and use maybe a charcoal briquette machine to form different shapes of it.
Wow. I so admire all of these practices that have right at the core, right up here, this idea of there is no waste. We just to be one with our planet, we have to be able to figure out how to reuse, recycle, or renew what seems to be a problem in the community.
Yeah,
Kudos.
because there's so many things we can even make, even if we don't have resources to make things like those ones, we can even use it and make maybe something like compost, because we don't need a lot for compost, because most people are farmers, and it will be a good type of compost, because you can easily like harvest it and dig a
Mhm.
hole and put it there and just wait for a while, and while mixing up down, and you can have your compost. So yeah, however much I don't care how we are going to use it, but I just want it out of the lake.
Yeah. Do you have
Yeah,
partners like our folks that are fishermen joining in the project, or community members, or is it?
yeah. The community has been very supportive, and there are even so many people who are trying to do like the making the handbags. So many people are doing it in small scale, but I'm trying to mobilize so that we can have one big one, so that we can be able to find market for the products from the lake, from water hyacinth, and also mm, people are willing to partner with us. People are willing to do so many things with that. It's only that also I'm in an active fundraising now, and trying to find ways to pull out resources and make sure that this is done. And but
Wow.
people are so supportive, and the community has been very supportive, and they are also getting a lot of difficulties. Like fishermen cannot fish because already when the hyacinth is there, we are having low oxygen supply because they're taking a lot of oxygen from the water, so fish are dying. And
Mm,
also the fishermen cannot move around freely in the water because there is blockage of this blockage around. They cannot move around the lake like comfortably because there is a lot of these things. And it will be a win-win for them. If we remove them, they can fish well, and that's why we are getting a lot of support.
wow. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
Hard work though. It sounds like it's very challenging work.
Yeah, it's very challenging. It requires a lot of commitment because the lake is so big. We only have a small portion of the lake in Kenya. And what I've realized with my current research is that we are only experiencing the problem in Kenya because we have a lot of catchment areas in Kenya, and our catchment areas are highly populated, and we are putting a lot in the lake that is feeding the hyacinth. So is
Mm,
also a problem brought by pollution originally, and I'm trying to incorporate the treatment of the root cause in my project so that we can also educate the community on pollution.
mhm.
Yeah, it's so great to watch these conversations and see what kind of questions, come up for you, Cece. And I'm really grateful of the spontaneity and also just the showing up, right? You're just showing up, you're listening, you're having a conversation with, David and Danny, and if there were time with everyone here, and that is a practice in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
To just listen, ask a question, not have to sort of figure out, oh, is it the right question? Is it the wrong question? Just exploring, right? Just being curious. Curious doesn't have to be something that's done with a capital C in training, you just show up, right? And you be curious. And
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
wondering,
Yeah,
I'm so curious. I'm like, okay, Danny, I want to go check out your coffee. And David, I want to come visit and see this in action. And that's how I am in the world. I just want to learn as much as I can. And I
yeah,
think
yeah.
sounds like this group does too. We're a bunch of learners.
Yeah, that's why I think we've been calling it a convening, because we have a conversation, right? And then we spread it out and see what we can learn from one another. And I think that we're all experts here. And I'm just wondering, and we have, a few minutes left, and I want to be respectful of the time. There may be some people here who might want to reach out and ask you a couple of questions. So let us know later, what your availability is, if they wanted to follow up and ask you a few questions from time to time.
Yeah.
And also, as we close and as we're coming to a close here, what is it that's, for you, what's the one hope that you would have for the young change makers as they leave this conversation and they go out into their field, right, wherever it is, whether it's in a city or in a rural community or in their home? What's the one wish that you have that they'll take with them when we press the leave button?
Wow, the one way.
Can I also ask like a question? Short
Oh, yeah,
question?
sure. You can ask a question. Yeah, of course. I think that we have a few minutes.
Can I ask now? About your conversation, I was just asking, have you ever been in a situation where like you have conflicting opinions and you find that the only solution is to give up an opinion that you rightly think is true, not convinced that you should go for another one, but just compromise for the sake of going forward? And how have you made sure that you get the best out of that situation?
Oh, that's a great question, Charles.
Yeah, Charles, that's a great question. I have had that situation where, as a school leader, I had that situation quite often. Again, it gets complicated when you have student needs, parent needs, teacher needs in a school, right? And then also what I would call the overall school goal needs, which is, children learning and having data that supports that. So I was constantly in that situation where I would disagree with something as simple as, I'll just use a really simple example, like chewing gum in school, or kids being able to wear their hoodies up, right, and be all covered up, right? And I would have very specific opinions, and I would have to compromise to a level where I would go along with the final decision, even though I didn't agree with it. As a parent, we call this picking your battles, right? Letting go of some things so they can move forward. I never, ever do when it really hits one of my top values. So, for example, I was in a year-long conflict at a school once, and I was not going to let go of a value that I had around education and my belief that students need to be self-directed in their learning. Teachers sometimes want to just go, here, study this, write that, and students wouldn't have choice. I spent a year not giving up my position because it was so important to my value system. And how it finally got solved is, I believe in the beauty of science. Science will often help you solve a disagreement if you can agree together to collect data and look at it, right?
Yeah.
If you have the time and you do not want to compromise so much on a final decision that you give away everything, I propose that you come together and say, wait, before we make this decision, let's collect data. Let's look at it together. So it's not just our ideas, it's a whole composite of voices. And that's what I did one time. And in this year-long school situation. And it was remarkable. We let the kids talk about what was important to them in this decision, and then we moved forward. So does that answer your question, Charles? I think
Totally.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself, how important is this? And if it's really, really important to your value system, I recommend fighting for it.
Yeah, yeah,
And getting more voices into it so that you have you have data, or you have stories, you have pictures that help show it in a bigger way.
That's
Yeah.
so great. And so,
Thank-
Charles,
thank
you
you.
modeled that, right? You came right in there just before I was going to try to move the group into some different kind of conversation. You just said, but I have a question. And you just, that's wonderful. That was important. And I'm so glad that you spoke up and asked that question, because it's a great question and a great answer.
And that's a great future topic, Gail. Like,
right.
I think it's worth exploring as a group. When have I had to give up, give in? And what did I learn from that? And when did I have to really fight for what I believed in? Not fight in the, but really work hard in all different angles to make something happen that was challenged by others.
And that ties into, resiliency and grit and the values and coming back. What is this me? Am I going to, dig my feet in this one because it's a value versus sort of an ego but anyways, we're coming to the end. I wish we could keep talking. These conversations are always never long enough.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Give us the one wish, right? What do you wish for all of us? I'm going to hold you to that one now.
I think for today, it would be different tomorrow or yesterday, but based on what we've talked about today, my one wish is that you all believe in yourselves every day, that you commit to who you are, what you're doing, that it is right and purposeful. And yes, it's hard, but that you can do it. I know that probably sounds cheesy, but in this day and age, I think taking time each day to reflect on who we are and what we're up against and what we're doing, and committing to that builds our belief in ourselves. And that would be my one wish, is that you practice that, a piece of that every day. We're in kind of a give up or blame others world right now. And I think we all need to really invest in that belief in ourselves, especially because from what I've heard from several of your projects, you are taking on, the planet, right? That's like, that's big. You're taking on, community. You're taking on your own livelihoods in challenging times. So that's my wish, is that we all build our belief in ourselves every day through some action, reflection.
Beautiful, so inspiring.
Oh,
I'm so grateful for you and for this group. And again, like Danny said, it's always very inspiring to
yeah. And I think, Avi, did you send out my email address? Because I'm available on email. Feel free to connect with me if I can be helpful in any way, or just listen. I'm happy to be a connection for you if and when you need that.
Thank you so much, Cece.
Yeah, we will share that. We haven't shared it yet, but we will make a follow-up email and share with this group. And it's a burst of inspiration, a lot to think about. But I think most importantly, that kind of idea of self-belief that I think comes from the conversation. And so, although it was a very simple sentence that you kind of leave us with, I think the whole hour has been giving that energy and that boost of inspiration, and kind of in many ways, kind of self-love of, we can do this. And yeah, we're tackling those big problems, but we're going to do it we're going to do it together. So thank you so much for your time. And thank you, Gail, for making this connection happen, and for everyone for joining us today. And I sincerely hope we all can stay in touch, and we hope we can share updates from some of these incredible projects regularly with you as well, and hope folks can join. I saw David wrote something about him being a school teacher, and so hopefully he's actually able to make a connection offline as well, and you thank you for your energy, your time, and the knowledge that you've shared with all of us, Cici. Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for having me. And Abhi, share your project with me too, because I didn't get to hear a lot about yours. So I would love to hear more about what you're doing.
For sure. I think and one of the funny things is that you mentioned curiosity. It was one of the first things that stood out for me when we got connected, because almost immediately you had kind of this interest in learning more about what I was doing. And I think that's incredible. So I will be sure to kind of send an email out separately to you and also share a bit of the work that we're doing at Little Big Fun and also at Bean Voyage. But yeah, thank you for joining us. And I hope we can stay in touch via email and hopefully more of these conversations as well.
Absolutely. And be in touch if
showing up.
you're ever traveling through Boulder.
Will do.
Be in touch, okay?
And I think Danny is in Boulder, right? Yeah. And but yes, thank you, Charles and Danny and David, for being here. It was super, super fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.